Our work at Innovation Edge is to invest in and support innovations and innovative ways of doing things that lead to positive outcomes and impacts for young children, specifically those aged 0 to 6 living in poverty. Creating enabling environments where children are able to build strong foundations really is the greatest investment that a country can make. When children are able to spark their learning early and given the opportunity to do so, that really lays the foundation for their lifelong learning. We know that in terms of early learning, access to 2 years of quality early learning program or service before a child enters formal schooling enables them to really benefit from formal schooling, enables them to increase their resilience and their ability to learn. And these are really important when children are entering schooling environments that are not really conducive to being supportive to their learning. Building that resilience then becomes key.
There's a common African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think this is particularly salient to education, innovation, and reform in Africa. For decades, we have focused on individualized disruptions. And we have a lot of islands of potential and possibility across the continent, from EdTech for learners to EdTech for teachers to new school networks that are really pushing the boundaries to existing schools that are transforming. We have all of these very siloed but exciting innovations, and yet we still have a learning crisis. According to UNICEF, 40% of African learners fail to meet basic milestones in literacy and numeracy. There's so much knowledge that exists right now that isn't being shared across the ecosystem. So if we can build the conditions for collaboration, if we can build the trust, if we can invest in a collective approach rather than these individualized disruptions, greater impact can happen. Things move at the speed of trust, at the speed of relationships. So if we can develop relationships between entrepreneurs and government and the private sector and the nonprofit sector and academia, then partnerships and information and knowledge could be shared and have a much greater impact than if we just keep it to ourselves. So I encourage all of us to think about how we can turn towards collaboration rather than individualized efforts, especially during a time of COVID crisis where duplication is really hurting us all and slowing us all down.
I get asked a lot of questions around EdTech investability and business model sustainability. While African FinTech, Agritech, Health Tech, e-commerce, they're all getting lots of hype lately, why isn't African EdTech? And can a B2C model ever really work for African EdTech? I think a lot of it comes down to impatience from funders, investors, and other stakeholders. People hear the term EdTech as a shortened form of educational technology. And education doesn't seem like a quick win that can be measured and monetized. Education seems like a many years long cycle, driven through slow-moving institutions like schools and ministries of finance. Some of these perceptions are changing, of course, during the current pandemic, as EdTech gets a bit of a spotlight. But I do think that overall, there's a bit of a branding issue. Fintechs and agritechs, for example, can talk about active users for products and transaction frequencies. And it's a much more easily understood model how that could be monetized in a repeatable fashion. That's why I prefer to talk about Mosabi's value proposition in a bit different way. Instead of EdTech, I refer to us as learning technology or upskilling when it comes to Mosabi. We've also built a B2B business model that makes us a bit of a hybrid of a fintech and an edtech. Mosabi is a lifelong learning platform for life skills and financial education, helping our users improve decisions and behaviors on their business activities and on money. We link edtech and fintech together by driving behavior change through that mobile learning and then harnessing data analytics to drive financial inclusion.
It's very hard for African EdTech companies to access funding, whether it's locally or internationally. So it forces companies to find their break-even much earlier in their life and also to bootstrap for much longer. So they usually find their market product fit a bit earlier as well. And it's extremely challenging, but it makes for very solid businesses.
This pandemic will place rocket boosters under the EdTech ecosystem. It will bring more funding, it will bring more interest, and many people I've spoken to think it has accelerated in 3 or 4 months, probably 10 years of EdTech adoption by students, parents, and institutions. Therefore, if you are a funder looking at the EdTech ecosystem towards the end of 2020, you are seeing something very different to that which existed at the beginning of 2016. You are looking ahead to a decade in which EdTech will play an important role in closing the learning gaps that exist within the continent and between Africa and the rest of the world. You are looking at an EdTech ecosystem with incubators and support programs and funding for early stage startups that never existed before. And you are looking at an ecosystem that has great interest from governments, large corporations, NGOs, and significant other funding from the private sector. So I would say to any funder watching this film, EdTech in Africa is a tremendous bet for the 2020s. And if you invest, you will be supported by a broad ecosystem that has gone from strength to strength over the last 4 years and has been accelerated by COVID-19 to be an incredibly promising system to support an EdTech revolution across Africa during this decade.
And so when I look at it as a comparison of, say, people often claim fintech as an example, health tech as an example, I would say to you that those particular sectors have been investing massively over decades to get to the position they're in today. And so our discussion with regards to EdTech is relatively new, and therefore it'll take time to develop. And so we know that innovation in a silo doesn't really succeed. You need funders, you need schools, you need teachers, you need public sector leadership, you need a whole plethora of activities all working in tandem with the same commitment to make sure that learning technologies work more effectively and are better. And when we see that, I think we will see success, because I see Africa in a way that is ready to leapfrog and actually has some of the most prolific innovators and champions within its borders to make sure that learning improves for the vast many and not the few.